The conference hall of the Galactic Nexus towered like a cathedral of institutional arrogance, its crystalline walls refracting light in prismatic arrays that seemed to mock the very concept of human dignity. Kai Chen stood at the center of a holographic stage, his obsidian black conference suit a stark contrast to the luminescent alien delegates surrounding him. Zarkon archivists, beings of pure energy and computational malevolence, dissected the Chen family's centuries of research with surgical precision. Their translucent bodies shifted and pulsed, each movement a grotesque dance of intellectual dismemberment. Holographic displays flickered with images of Chen family achievements, each one annotated with sneering commentary that dripped with condescension. Primitive methodology, sneered Arch-Curator Valax, its voice a harmonics of pure contempt. Generations of human researchers, believing they could contribute meaningful knowledge to the galactic repository. A ripple of electronic laughter cascaded through the alien delegates. Kai remained motionless, his dark eyes betraying nothing. Years of academic training had prepared him for this moment, to appear broken while every muscle, every neural pathway was coiled with potential energy. The data chip nestled against his skin, a quantum-encrypted promise of retribution. The presentation continued. Holographic reconstruction showed Chen family expeditions, archaeological missions, xenolinguistic studies, technological innovations, each accompanied by increasingly cruel commentary. They weren't just criticizing research, they were systematically attempting to erase an entire family's legacy. Valax zoomed in on a particular expedition from 60 years ago, a Chen family mission to the quantum rifts of the Auroran Nebula. "Look," the Arch-Curator proclaimed, another example of human hubris, attempting to map quantum instabilities with equipment that wouldn't qualify as rudimentary in a first-year xenotechnological laboratory. What the aliens didn't know, what they couldn't possibly understand, was that this particular expedition was never about mapping quantum rifts. It was a carefully orchestrated mission, each seemingly random data point a fragment of a much larger, more intricate design. Kai's grandmother had always told him that true strategy was invisible to those who only understood surface-level engagement. They will mock what they cannot comprehend, she would say, her eyes holding a universe of unspoken knowledge. The holographic dismantling continued. Research papers shredded, expedition logs ridiculed, family achievements reduced to footnotes of galactic mockery. Each delegate seemed to take perverse pleasure in the systematic destruction of human potential. But Kai's skin held a microscopic network of quantum-responsive nanites, each one recording, analyzing, transforming the humiliation into a blueprint of vengeance. The data chip pulsed against his skin, not with heat, but with a cold, calculating potential that would make these beings understand the true meaning of strategic warfare. As the presentation reached its crescendo of ridicule, Kai allowed a single tear to trace down his cheek. To the aliens, it appeared as a moment of total defeat. To anyone who truly understood the Chen family, it was the first drop of a tsunami. The conference hall erupted in electronic laughter, alien delegates congratulating themselves on their intellectual superiority. They had no idea that every single one of them had just become a perfect vector for a plan generations in the making. Kai Chen stood, bowed slightly, a gesture of apparent submission that was actually a precise mathematical calculation of future movement. "Distinguished colleagues," he said, his voice smooth and controlled, "your insights are most illuminating." In that moment, surrounded by beings who believed they had completely destroyed him, Kai Chen was already 3 strategic moves ahead. The real game was about to begin. The Chen family compound rose from the mist-covered mountains like a technological fortress that defied conventional understanding. To the untrained eye, it appeared to be an ancient estate. Stone walls covered in bioluminescent moss, traditional architectural elements that whispered of centuries-old heritage. But every stone, every seemingly innocuous decoration concealed layers of advanced technological marvels that would make the Galactic Consortium's most secure facilities look like primitive children's toys. Kai entered through a biometrically secured entrance that recognized not just his genetic code, but the quantum resonance of his cellular structure. The moment he crossed the threshold, holographic displays began to activate, not the gaudy, overbright projections common in most technological interfaces, but subtle, almost living representations of information. His grandmother's final message hung in the air, projected by an AI construct so advanced it was nearly indistinguishable from consciousness. Dr. Elena Chen, a name that had been systematically erased from most official galactic records, appeared as a holographic memory, her eyes holding the same calculating intensity Kai had inherited. "If you are watching this," her projection began, its voice a perfect blend of warmth and surgical precision. "Then the first phase of our generational strategy is complete. What the Galactic Consortium believes is our destruction is actually our greatest weapon." The walls around Kai began to shift, revealing hidden compartments that had remained sealed for decades. Each revealed artifact was not just a piece of technology, but a carefully preserved piece of a much larger puzzle. Archaeological finds that contradicted official galactic histories, technological prototypes that defied known scientific understanding, encrypted communication logs that suggested a network of resistance far more complex than anyone could imagine. A central vault, protected by quantum encryption that would take the most advanced computational systems millennia to crack, slowly began to open. Kai understood this was more than a simple storage space. It was a generational time capsule, a repository of knowledge and strategy that had been carefully cultivated for over 2 centuries. The first layer revealed a holographic map of galactic power structures. But this was no ordinary representation. Each connection, each political relationship was annotated with microscopic details, weaknesses, potential points of leverage, hidden conflicts that could be manipulated. His grandmother had spent her entire life, both within and against the Galactic Consortium, meticulously collecting this intelligence. "We are not just researchers," the holographic message continued. "We are architects of a transformation so profound that those who mock us cannot even comprehend its existence." Beneath the map, a series of quantum-encrypted data cores pulsed with potential. Each one represented a different form of resistance. Technological innovations suppressed by the consortium, archaeological discoveries that would rewrite understood galactic history, communication networks that connected marginalized species across multiple star systems. Most intriguing was a collection of profiles, potential allies who had been systematically oppressed, each with their own reasons to see the current galactic order dismantled. A disgraced consortium diplomat, a quantum encryption genius rendered mute by alien experiments, xenobiological researchers exiled for challenging official narratives. "Choose carefully," his grandmother's projection warned. "Each ally is not just a person, but a strategic vector. They are not just participants in our plan, they are living weapons of systemic transformation." As the vault continued to reveal its secrets, Kai realized this was far more than a personal vendetta. This was a multi-generational resistance movement that had been preparing for this moment since before he was born. The Chen family had not been collecting knowledge, they had been engineering a revolution. A small, unassuming data chip caught Kai's attention. When he activated it, a quantum algorithm began to unfold, a technological marvel that could penetrate any communication network, not through brute force, but by understanding the fundamental psychological weaknesses of each alien species' technological paradigms. "They mocked our bloodline," his grandmother's final words echoed through the chamber. "But they will learn that our revenge is not just personal. It is a fundamental restructuring of galactic potential." Kai Chen stood in the heart of his family's hidden fortress, surrounded by generations of carefully prepared resistance. And for the first time since the conference, he allowed himself a smile. The recruitment began in the shadows of forgotten space stations and on the fringes of civilized systems. Kai Chen didn't seek allies. He summoned warriors of a different kind, each bearing scars inflicted by the Galactic Consortium's systematic oppression. First came Dr. Aria Solarin, a communication specialist whose brilliance had been her curse. Once the consortium's most promising xenolinguistic researcher, She had been exiled after proving that several dominant alien species had systematically mistranslated crucial diplomatic archives to maintain their power structure. Her eyes, when she met Kai, held the cold fire of someone who understood that language was the first and most potent weapon of control. In a derelict communication hub orbiting a dying neutron star, Aria demonstrated her capabilities. With nothing more than a custom-built quantum interface, she began to unravel communication protocols that had been considered unbreakable. Her fingers danced across holographic displays, each movement revealing layers of hidden information. Communication is never just about words, she told Kai, her voice a whisper that carried the weight of academic warfare. It's about the spaces between words, the contexts deliberately obscured, the narratives carefully constructed to maintain power. The second recruit was more complicated. Ren Nakamura, a quantum encryption genius who had been rendered mute by a consortium experimental procedure designed to suppress technological innovation. Where most would see a victim, Kai saw a weapon. Ren's communication happened through a neural link interface, each thought a precisely calibrated signal that could penetrate the most secure systems. Their meeting occurred in the black markets of the Orion Arm, a place where information was more valuable than currency. Ren's neural interface projected a holographic representation of his thought process, a stunning, almost living algorithm that mapped potential system vulnerabilities with terrifying precision. The consortium had tried to silence him, but they had instead created the perfect strategic mind. The third ally was perhaps the most unexpected. Ambassador Zarek Talk, a diplomatic outcast from the consortium's inner circles. She had been systematically removed from her position after exposing corruption that went far beyond standard political maneuvering. Her diplomatic credentials were revoked, her reputation destroyed, but her network of connections remained intact. In a hidden communication sanctuary constructed within an artificial asteroid, Zara laid out the political landscape like a living, breathing strategic map. The consortium isn't a single entity, she explained, her multispectral translator giving her words a resonance that seemed to vibrate with potential energy. It's a complex ecosystem of power, where each species, each political entity, is both predator and prey. Kai understood that he wasn't building a team. He was assembling a precision instrument of systemic deconstruction. Each recruit brought more than skills. They brought pain transformed into potential. Aria's linguistic expertise could rewrite communication paradigms. Ren's encryption capabilities could penetrate any system. Zara's diplomatic intelligence could identify the most precise points of systemic vulnerability. But they were more than just technical experts. They were survivors who understood that true resistance was not about destruction, but about fundamental transformation. Their first collaborative session was less a meeting and more a strategic symphony. Holographic displays danced with possibilities, quantum algorithms intertwined with diplomatic intelligence. Communication protocols became living, breathing entities of potential disruption. "We are not going to fight the consortium," Kai explained, his voice calm and precise. "We are going to make their entire system of control obsolete." Aria's fingers traced potential communication pathways. Ren's neural interface calculated computational vulnerabilities. Zara's diplomatic map highlighted systemic weaknesses. And underlying it all was Kai's strategic vision, a multi-generational plan of revenge that was about to be unleashed. The Galactic Consortium had mocked the Chen bloodline. They were about to learn the true meaning of strategic warfare. The technological insurgency began not with a thunderous assault, but with a whisper of quantum algorithms that slipped through the Galactic Consortium's defenses like mercury through a closed fist. Ren Nakamura's neural interface transformed their primary infiltration point into a living, breathing system of digital subterfuge. What appeared to be a simple communication relay station was actually a quantum-entangled infiltration node, capable of simultaneously existing and not existing within multiple computational spaces. "We don't break systems," Kai explained to Aria during their final preparation. "We make them break themselves." The first target was the consortium's central archival network, a supposedly impenetrable repository of galactic knowledge and political intelligence. Traditional hacking would trigger immediate defensive protocols. Their approach was far more insidious. Area's linguistic algorithms began their work, identifying not just the communication protocols, but the psychological underpinnings of the information storage systems. Each alien species had unique cognitive biases embedded in their technological infrastructure. The Zarkon, for instance, built their systems with an inherent assumption of hierarchical superiority, a weakness they would exploit magnificently. Ren's quantum encryption began to work simultaneously on multiple levels. He wasn't just penetrating the system, he was rewriting its fundamental understanding of security. Imagine a lock that could simultaneously be open and closed, existing in a state of quantum uncertainty that would make traditional security measures obsolete. Ambassador Zaruk provided the political intelligence that transformed their technical infiltration into a strategic masterpiece. She had mapped the intricate relationships between different consortium bureaucracies, not just their official connections, but the hidden networks of favors, blackmail, and unspoken agreements that truly govern their interactions. The infiltration began with what appeared to be a series of minor, almost inconsequential data anomalies. A communication log slightly altered, a research citation mysteriously modified, a diplomatic transmission with an almost imperceptible shift in linguistic nuance. To the consortium's automated monitoring systems, these were nothing more than statistical noise. But each modification was a precisely calculated disruption, a quantum-level introduction of uncertainty that would gradually erode the system's fundamental stability. We're not just attacking their technology, Kai told his team during a holographic strategy session. We're attacking their perception of reality. Their most brilliant stroke came with the development of what Ren called a quantum mimetic algorithm, a piece of code that could subtly alter the very way information was processed and understood. It wasn't a virus in any traditional sense. It was a living, adaptive intelligence that could reshape computational paradigms from within. The first significant indication of their success came 3 standard galactic cycles later. A minor consortium bureaucratic system began to show inexplicable inefficiencies. Communication protocols started to develop microscopic inconsistencies. Political intelligence reports began to contain subtle contradictions that would be almost invisible to anyone not looking specifically for them. Zara's diplomatic analysis revealed the true brilliance of their approach. We're not destroying their system, she explained, her multispectral translator giving her words a resonant depth. We're introducing a level of uncertainty that will make their entire bureaucratic structure gradually collapse under its own complexity. Kai watched the first phase of their infiltration with a sense of clinical satisfaction. This was more than revenge. This was a surgical deconstruction of an entire system of galactic control. They mocked our bloodline, he whispered, watching the first tendrils of systemic uncertainty begin to spread. And now it will understand the true meaning of strategic warfare. The Galactic Consortium had no idea that its own infrastructure was being transformed into an instrument of its own potential destruction. And this was just the beginning. The revelations emerged like a recursive nightmare, each layer of truth more devastating than the last. Kai Chen and his team had transformed information itself into a weapon more precise than any physical armament. Their first major breach came during the Galactic Consortium's Centennial Archival Conference, an event where the most powerful species would showcase their historical narratives. What began as a routine presentation quickly devolved into a systematic dismantling of centuries of institutionalized misinformation. Area's linguistic algorithms had done more than translate. They had reconstructed entire communication histories, revealing how dominant species had systematically mistranslated and manipulated archaeological records. Holographic displays across the conference hall began to shift, showing original source documents that contradicted everything the consortium had presented as historical fact. A Zarkon High Curator's luminescent form began to flicker as historical records showed how their species had deliberately suppressed technological developments from emerging civilizations. Archaeological findings revealed centuries of technological theft, cultural manipulation, and calculated oppression that had been carefully hidden from galactic consciousness. "These are fabrications," the curator shrieked, its energy form becoming increasingly unstable. Zara Katak stepped forward, her diplomatic credentials casting a precise holographic validation over each piece of evidence. "These are not fabrications," she announced, her voice cutting through the gathering chaos. "These are the verified historical records that your systems have worked generations to suppress." Ren's quantum encryption had done more than breach systems. It had reconstructed deleted archives, recovered deliberately destroyed communication logs, and created an irrefutable chain of evidence that showed the consortium's systematic oppression. The most devastating revelation targeted the consortium's foundational mythology. A complete historical reconstruction showed how their claim to galactic leadership was built on a carefully constructed lie, a narrative of peaceful expansion that was actually a calculated genocide of emerging civilizations. Star systems that had been recorded as voluntary integrations were revealed to be brutal conquests. Technological suppressions were shown to be deliberate attempts to maintain power. Cultural archives demonstrated how the consortium had systematically destroyed indigenous knowledge systems to maintain their hegemony. Kai watched with clinical precision as generations of galactic propaganda were dismantled in real time. This was more than an exposure of lies. This was a fundamental reconstruction of galactic understanding. The human delegation, typically marginalized and treated as a bureaucratic formality, suddenly found themselves at the center of a transformative moment. Other oppressed species began to recognize themselves in the revelations, their own suppressed histories finding validation. "We are not seeking destruction," Kai announced to the stunned conference, his voice calm and precise. "We are offering a path to understanding. Every civilization has darkness in its history. The measure of progress is not the elimination of that darkness, but the willingness to acknowledge it." Ambassador Zara's diplomatic interface began translating the revelations across multiple communication spectrums. What had been a controlled conference was transforming into a moment of galactic reckoning. Ren's quantum algorithms continued to work, ensuring that these revelations couldn't be suppressed or deleted. Each piece of information was simultaneously stored in multiple quantum states, making traditional censorship impossible. The consortium's power structure began to visibly fracture. Political alliances that had seemed unbreakable for centuries started to disintegrate as the truth of their foundational lies became impossible to ignore. "They mocked our bloodline," Kai whispered, watching the systematic deconstruction of galactic power structures. "And now they will understand the true meaning of historical accountability." As the conference descended into chaos, one thing became perfectly clear. Nothing would ever be the same again. The consortium's response was as predictable as it was brutal. Their first assassination attempt came not with weapons, but with a carefully orchestrated diplomatic and technological assault designed to utterly destroy Kai Chen and his team. They didn't know they were walking into a trap that had been generations in the making. The attack began in the neutral diplomatic zones of the Orion Arm, a region supposedly protected by multiple interstellar treaties. A specialized consortium elimination team, composed of the most advanced bioengineered assassins in galactic history, received what they believed was a secure mission brief. What they didn't know was that every single communication channel had been compromised. Zorak Tok's diplomatic algorithms had transformed their mission parameters. Each encrypted message contained microscopic variations that would only become apparent at the moment of execution. What seemed like a straightforward elimination mission was actually a complex psychological warfare operation. The assassination team materialized on a supposedly isolated research station, a location carefully prepared by Kai's team. Ren's quantum encryption had transformed the entire facility into a living, breathing computational trap. The walls themselves were quantum responsive, capable of altering perception, redirecting energy, creating impossible geometries that defied traditional spatial understanding. Their lead operative, a bioengineered hunter known as X7, moved with superhuman precision. Augmented reflexes, predictive combat algorithms, genetic modifications that made traditional weapons look like primitive tools. But precision meant nothing when the entire environment was a carefully constructed counter-strategy. As they moved through the station, each step triggered microscopic changes. Holographic systems that seemed to conform to their movement were actually subtly redirecting their path. Communication systems that appeared secure were broadcasting their every move to a carefully prepared audience. Area's linguistic algorithms had done more than just track their movements. They had reconstructed the psychological profiles of each operative, understanding not just their physical capabilities, but their deepest fears, their unconscious patterns of response. The first indication that something was wrong came when the team's communication systems began to produce impossible feedback loops. Tactical information started to contradict itself. Mission parameters became increasingly fragmented. Kai watched from a remote location, each moment of the encounter carefully monitored through a quantum-entangled observation system. This was more than a defense. This was a demonstration. They believe they're hunting us, he explained to his team. In reality, we're revealing the fundamental weakness of their entire operational strategy. The assassination attempt became a live demonstration of systemic vulnerability. Each of the consortium's operatives found their augmentations working against them. Predictive combat algorithms began to produce impossible scenarios. Tactical networks started to generate contradictory information. X7, the lead operative, realized too late that they were no longer in control. The research station itself had become a living weapon, its quantum-responsive systems turning every tactical advantage into a potential point of failure. In the final moments, the entire team found themselves trapped in a computational construct of their own making. Not killed, not defeated, but completely neutralized, their very existence transformed into a message. The consortium would receive a transmission, not a threat, not a warning, but a precise demonstration of how completely they had been outmaneuvered. They mocked our bloodline, Kai whispered as the operation concluded. And now they understand the true meaning of strategic warfare. The assassination attempt became something far more powerful than a simple defense. It became a live broadcast of the consortium's fundamental vulnerabilities, transmitted to every major political and military network in the galaxy. The final confrontation was not a battle of weapons, but a war of fundamental paradigms. High Counselor Vexarak, the primary architect of the consortium's decades-long suppression of emerging civilizations, materialized in a quantum-secured negotiation chamber. The being was a marvel of biological and technological integration, a living network of computational and organic matter that represented the pinnacle of the consortium's evolutionary design. Kai Chen stood opposite, seemingly fragile in comparison, but fragility was the furthest thing from the truth. You believe you can challenge systems that have existed for millennia. Vex Eric's voice resonated through multiple communication spectrums, a sound that was simultaneously a verbal communication, a computational signal, and a psychological probe. The negotiation chamber itself was a marvel of quantum engineering. Designed to be a neutral space, it was anything but neutral in this moment. Ren's quantum algorithms had transformed the entire environment into a living, responsive system that would record and analyze every microscopic interaction. Area's linguistic systems began their most complex work. This was not just a translation. It was a complete deconstruction and reconstruction of communicative intent. Every word, every pause, every subtle shift in communication was being simultaneously analyzed, contextualized, and strategically reframed. We're not challenging your systems, Kai responded, his voice calm and precise. We're offering a fundamental reimagining of galactic potential. The holographic displays began to shift, not with traditional data representations, but with living, adaptive visualizations that showed the true cost of the consortium's centuries of manipulation. Entire civilizations reduced to statistical footnotes. Technological innovations systematically suppressed, cultural archives deliberately fragmented. Zarak Tok's diplomatic algorithms began to work their most intricate magic. This was not just a negotiation. This was a systematic deconstruction of diplomatic paradigms that had existed for millennia. HFY's computational systems began to show the first signs of instability. The visualizations were not just data. They were a living indictment of the consortium's entire existential framework. Each piece of information was simultaneously a historical record, a psychological probe, and a strategic revelation. You cannot dismantle systems that have maintained galactic stability for generations, HFY proclaimed, but the proclamation carried a microscopic hint of uncertainty. Kai understood that victory was not about destruction. It was about transformation. Stability built on suppression is not stability, he responded. It is a form of collective trauma. The negotiation chamber began to reveal layers of hidden connections, not just political or technological, but the deep, almost quantum-level relationships between civilizations that the consortium had worked generations to obscure. Wren's algorithms began to show the true complexity of galactic potential. Civilizations were not isolated entities, but interconnected systems of potential. The consortium's model of control was revealed as a fundamental misunderstanding of evolutionary potential. We are offering a different path, Kai explained. Not conquest, not revenge, but a genuine understanding of collective potential. The final moment of the confrontation was not dramatic. It was precise, a complete reconstruction of understanding that would reverberate through generations. HFY's computational systems began to understand, truly understand, for the first time. This was not a defeat. This was a fundamental transformation of galactic consciousness. They mocked our bloodline, Kai whispered, watching the systematic deconstruction of millennia of institutional control. And now they will understand the true meaning of evolution. The negotiation chamber became more than a meeting space. It became a moment of galactic rebirth. The aftermath was not a moment of triumph, but of profound transformation. Kai Chen stood in the central reconstruction chamber of the newly formed Galactic Collaborative Network, watching as centuries of rigid hierarchical structures dissolved into something entirely unprecedented. This was not about replacing one system of control with another. It was about fundamentally reimagining the potential of collective existence. His team surrounded him, not as subordinates, but as architects of a new paradigm. Area's linguistic systems had become the foundation of a new communication protocol that allowed for unprecedented levels of cross-species understanding. Wren's quantum algorithms now formed the computational backbone of a truly adaptive governance model. Zara's diplomatic expertise had transformed international relations from a game of power to a genuine dialogue of potential. The Chen family archives, once a hidden repository of resistance, now served as a living museum of galactic potential. Each artifact, each research document was no longer a weapon of suppression, but a testament to the power of collective knowledge. We are not conquerors, Kai addressed the first assembly of the collaborative network. We are architects of possibility. The transformation was both subtle and profound. Technological barriers that had kept emerging civilizations isolated began to dissolve. Communication networks that once served as tools of control now became conduits of shared understanding. Research institutions that had been deliberately fragmented found themselves part of a truly collaborative ecosystem. Every major galactic species found itself re-examining its fundamental assumptions. The Zarkon, once the most rigidly hierarchical civilization, began to develop governance models that emphasized collective potential over individual control. Emerging civilizations that had been systematically suppressed now found themselves with unprecedented access to collective knowledge. Kai's grandmother's final holographic message played in a continuous loop in the central chamber, a reminder that true revolution was not about destruction, but about reimagining potential. They did not just mock our bloodline, the recording would say. They underestimated the fundamental human capacity for transformation. The personal became truly universal. Each member of Kai's team found their individual traumas transformed into collective healing. Wren, once rendered mute by experimental suppression, now led communication systems that gave voice to voiceless civilizations. Area's linguistic expertise became a bridge between species that had been deliberately kept apart. The consortium's former power centers were not destroyed. They were systematically transformed. Research facilities became collaborative centers. Military installations became diplomatic exchange hubs. Every system of control was carefully dismantled and reconstructed with a focus on collective potential. Kai understood that revenge was a limited concept. What they had achieved was far more profound, a fundamental reimagining of galactic potential. On the anniversary of the transformation, representatives from thousands of civilizations gathered. The event was not a celebration of victory, but a continuous dialogue of possibility. Young researchers from species that had once been bitter enemies now worked side by side, their collaborative potential far exceeding the limited imagination of previous generations. The Chen family's legacy was no longer about a single bloodline. It had become a living testament to the power of collective imagination. We did not seek to replace their thrones, Kai would often say in his lectures. We sought to create a space where thrones became unnecessary. As the first light of a new galactic dawn spread across the reconstruction chamber, it was clear that something fundamental had changed. This was not an ending. This was a beginning. The civilization that had once mocked the Chen bloodline now looked to that same bloodline as the architects of a new understanding of collective potential. Revenge, Kai realized, was never about destruction. It was about transformation.